Here we go.
You really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Hey, motherfucker. What do you like to do?
Oh, I don't know. Play chess. Screw.
Well, let's play chess.
They give off to Jonathan Taylor. Jump cutting his way. Close to the goal line. He's in there. Touchdown. I-N-D-Y. Jonathan Taylor.
Wheeler finds Quan from the logo.
Here's Halliburton into the front court. Mishandled it, but gets a shot. Hits it. Hits it.
John, I have never been better to be on the air with you here in Indianapolis, a place where so many of my dreams have come true.
The Ride with JMV on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
It is The Ride. It is the guy that sounds like JMV. Now that he got all skinny and he's got new hair, I don't look like JMV. Greg Rakestraw filling in. Speaking of hair, man, the samurai thing you have going, James, is getting quite impressive.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So you are like a robe away from being like perhaps like the skinniest sumo wrestler ever. You could be like Mike Myers had Mini-Me. Mm-hmm. You could be like Yokozuna's Mini-Me here at some point in time.
Well, now I have a Halloween costume.
See?
So there you go.
So The Last Samurai clearly is producing today's show in James. John is not here, and for that there was much rejoicing. Not that even though he says he sucks, he doesn't work on that as kind of as much as he used to, or kind of play off that as much as he used to. And far from it. No, he's really stinking good because he's on the air all the time. But after like the Jerry's Kids telethons he was asked to do before Pacers playoff games, and obviously the takeover, which, by the way, he seems to be too busy to answer my call when I am driving home from Indy 11 matches these days. I am ecstatic that John has a day off. Now, I'm assuming there's going to be some sort of shirtless, video shot from somebody's pool at some point in time that will surface on social media. What John also likes doing these days off is go down to the Odin meat locker. Unfortunately, Odin got flooded over the weekend. If you live in Marion County and parts north, you didn't see rain for a couple of days. In the Bloomington area and parts south, they have seen nothing but rain for the last couple of days. So hopefully everybody listening from where John's from in Greene County, Davies County, etc., Monroe County, hopefully they're doing okay from a flooding perspective. But I will not be flooding your timelines with shirtless poolside videos. That was me last week. I was actually in Michigan for most of the week. I know John doesn't like Michigan all that much. Michigan doesn't bother me, especially the part that is on Lake Michigan. That part's pretty freaking awesome. Without giving away too much, if you can spend time around Union Pier or New Buffalo, there are plenty of cool things to do. As I told Jake Query when I was on with him some 10 minutes or so ago, there is a certain liberty, a certain freedom that you get when you're hosting this show, and you don't normally do this on a regular basis, and especially when we have hit what seemingly is an ever-shrinking downtime in between sports seasons. There are so many wonderful things that occurred from the Pacers playing all the way to June 22nd, the furthest they ever have, obviously, in terms of a calendar, in terms of an NBA Finals appearance, that the shrinking of the downtime in the sports calendar of Indianapolis is pretty far down that list, but it does have an impact on us. And for example, I'll reference Jake Query again. I filled in for Derek Schultz with Jake a couple of weeks ago, between Games 5 and Game 6 of the NBA Finals, because Derek had already planned a summer vacation. And we haven't had to plan around summer vacations around NBA Finals in 25 years. Frankly, I watched Game 7 poolside from my laptop. If there was going to be this wonderful parade in downtown Indianapolis, I was going to miss it. And I would have wished we'd rather had the parade and I missed it than losing in Game 7. But still, everything was tremendous, all good, etc. I hate the fact that they lost, but I am still of the opinion that the last 2 months were far more positive than negative, even if Game 7 didn't go the way we wanted it to some 8 days ago. But now we are in that time where waiting for news on Miles Turner. We are waiting for the start of the Colts season. You frankly don't want to hear Colts news right now. Not that we're not supposed to talk about the Colts. We're kind of instructed to talk them up like every day. And obviously I work for the team, so I have no problem adhering to that. But you want it to be boring and all quiet on the Western Front when it comes to the Colts. Because generally when you hear news at the end of June or July before training camp starts, it's not good. So we are at that time where I can kind of do things that go off the beaten path. And I think I am better at that than most. It's part of the reason why I don't do a daily talk show. It's part of the reason why I do what I do with the free publicity as I look towards the camera, make sure the ISC logo gets in there. We get to do things a little bit differently. I enjoy the variety of sport. Like ABC's Wide World of Sports appeals to me from back in the day. I don't want to be the ski jumper guy that falls off, but the variety of sport, I always get a kick out of that. So today on the program, we'll talk about a team that plays in a league called the Basketball League. They play in the TBL. There's actually multiple teams combining for this, but they're also going to put together a team that is in the TBT that'll play at Hinkle Fieldhouse. I think that's 3 weekends from now. I believe that's going to be the case. We will talk to a guy that is a legend in the business, is a member of the Indiana Sports Writers and Sportscasters Hall of Fame, but he is primarily worked in the state of Kentucky, even though he has always had a soft spot for covering his alma mater, the Indiana Hoosiers. If you are a Southern Indiana native like me, you grew up reading the work of Rick Bozich. And I think while I have now been in Indianapolis for 31 years, basically, I was fortunate enough that my time as a kid and being a kid whose parents were great on so many levels, but in terms of fostering what I wanted to do for a living, I read the sports section of the Louisville Courier-Journal front to back basically every day. And that meant that I got to read the work of Pat Forty and Rick Bozich on a regular basis. And now I'm to a point, I know Pat to a certain degree. We've had conversations on the air, but actually know Rick. Without talking out of school, there is a person working in this market that at the same time this person was applying for a job locally, was applying for a job at WDRB in Louisville, where Rick was working in terms of on-air and writing online, what he transitioned to after his days with the Courier-Journal. And, I was kind of the point of reference to that person. And like 17-year-old me was freaking out that Rick Bozich was asking my opinion about a potential hire at Fox 41 in Louisville. Rick is retiring after doing this basically for 50 years. Rick will join us during the 4 o'clock hour of the program. Clearly, one of the topics of the day, and this is, not like major free agent news level content, but it's a good sidebar piece, and it triggered this thought in my mind about tracking this person down, especially when this person texted me out of thin air. But there is a report that the NHL potentially could be interested in putting an expansion team in Indianapolis. Or Atlanta, who has had the Flames, and they went to Calgary, and then they had the Thrashers, and they became the Winnipeg Jets, that if there is another round of NHL expansion, Atlanta has been talked about a great deal. But some other markets were thrown out, and Indianapolis was one of them. And I go, well, that's interesting. I'm not sure I see the fit, and I'm not trying to denigrate hockey. I'm not the NHL fan that I used to, but I married into a hockey family. I generally enjoy the sport, and I think the Fuel are having a bit of a renaissance, having moved up to their new location in Fishers, but I'm not sure that makes us an NHL market. However, what it does do is gives me an excuse to bring on a young broadcaster that I have known basically dating back to his days in high school, if not at least at Purdue University, in Mike Fulton. And Mike, first of all, a lot of broadcasters don't go to Purdue University. Secondly, a lot of broadcasters from this state don't end up being hockey announcers. Now, we say that. Maybe the best announcer at his sport until he retired a couple of years ago. Like if you ask people, who is the unquestioned best play-by-play guy in the business from a television standpoint, you would not get far down the list before somebody said Mike Emmerich, Doc Emmerich. Well, Doc grew up listening to Bob Chase call Fort Wayne Comets games on WoWo. He is from LaFountain, Indiana, which is north of Marion. And so the best hockey announcer in his time on the planet, and a guy that was thought to be perhaps the best play-by-play guy of any sport going in his heyday, was an Indiana guy. So there is a path for that. Another gentleman whose name escapes me that was the longtime voice of the Colorado Avalanche, was a Buff Jesuit grad. Obviously, Andrew Smith does a heck of a job, and he is a local product, Pike High School graduate, that calls the Fuel games now. In other words, there have been really good hockey announcers that have come from here, even if you don't necessarily think of Indianapolis or the state of Indiana as a hockey hotbed. Fort Wayne would be different because of the love affair that town has had with their minor league hockey team for like 7-8 decades at this point. But Mike Folta will be joining us coming up a little bit later on in the program. Stephen Holder will be on the show as well. That comes your way at 5 o'clock. And Scott Agnes will also join us in the 5 o'clock hour as well. Scotty and I will talk primarily Fever. We will mix in some Pacers into the conversation. And again, we are simply in a bit of a holding pattern in terms of waiting for Miles Turner news. Calendar flips from June 30th to July 1st tonight. There seems to be very little doubt in terms of Miles Turner wants to stay with the Pacers. The Pacers want to keep Miles Turner. We are also at this very unique point in terms of NBA free agency where there's really one team with legitimate salary cap space to bring somebody on board, and that team is the Brooklyn Nets. Brooklyn has shown no problem spending money in the past, but they're not exactly anywhere close to contending for a championship. In other words, there is not this great market on Miles Turner heading someplace else. And in the coverage of what the Pacers did for the better part of 2 months, it was the team, the team, the team, the team. And one of the things that we talked about ad nauseum was the longest tenured Indiana Pacer, Miles Turner, being here for 10 years, being a guy that, has a chance to catch up to a Jeff Foster, to a Dale Davis in terms of number of games played for the franchise. In other words, I don't think exactly it's a hot take sports radio issue about signing, not re-signing Miles Turner. I think it is a done deal. My friend Bob Kravitz likes to go Latin on you, a fait accompli. I would agree. It is simply going to be a matter of time in terms of when it actually happens. Could be tonight. Could be this afternoon we'll have in this talk show. And I think it's the right move. Now the question becomes, what is the budget going to be? What is the number of years going to be? I saw that Bobby Marks, or is it Sean Marks? I forget which Marks it is. One of the Marks brothers. That is the former NBA front office guy that works for ESPN. It's Bobby, correct?
Bobby, yes.
Sean is the former player. Bobby from New Zealand, the big guy. Bobby is the guy that actually works for ESPN.com. Used to work in the front office. Samurai, thank you for your guidance on that subject. But basically, Bobby said he did this piece over the course of the last week where it was like, hey, here's the one move I would do for every team. And he basically said the move I would make for the Indiana Pacers would be 3 years, $25 million per season for Miles Turner. So I will ask that very question to Scott Agnes coming up during the 5 o'clock hour of the program. And if that number is a little bit higher, okay. The Pacers going to luxury tax. The Pacers aren't exactly, I don't think, bidding against anybody else. What you are, and frankly, I'm not sure they're going to leave themselves in whatever deal they do with Miles to have any bit of salary cap flexibility to go out and get somebody else. What you are trying to do is not lowball a guy that has been loyal to you and you've really liked and you've built pieces around. He's not going to get Tyrese Halliburton money. He's not going to get Pascal Siakam money. Maybe length of the contract would be, part of the discussion or the debate that would be going on. But that's kind of what we're looking at from a Pacers standpoint. You know the drill. Phone lines are open. You got something you want to say? 317-239-1070 is the telephone number. You can always tweet to me at Greg Rakestraw. We'll kind of check those during the break. And I'm not sure, when I do this every day, I can't be like John, who can have a train of thought while checking Twitter simultaneously. I'm not sure my brain is wired to do a lot of things at one time, okay? That's not one of them. I don't have those synapses trained in that fashion at this point in time. And when we're not talking to the guest list that I have run down for you, we can have a variety of conversations about a variety of things because, frankly, it is that time of year where we tend to go off the beaten path. Like after having the Pacers be appointment viewing every other day or every 3 days, how spoiled were we for multiple reasons? You get to June 22nd and all of a sudden, all right, now what? Now what am I watching on television? So this weekend sports offerings, all right, if the Pacers aren't going to be on or any NBA Finals are going to be on, College World Series got done, NHL Stanley Cup Finals got done, what am I watching on TV? I spent way too much time watching a golf tournament yesterday where three guys shot 22 under, then had to go to a 5-hole playoff to finish it. I personally spent a lot of time watching the Gold Cup because I'm a soccer nerd and that's what I do. I'm not sure how much that translates over to this show. I spent time calling soccer as well, both Friday and Saturday, and have that again for the Indy 11 coming up Saturday night against Monterey Bay on Wish TV. But I'm not sure how much of the general audience wants to hear about that. I watched Formula One on Sunday morning. I'm not sure how much F1 gets brought up on the program. Again, we have hit a bit of a slower time. So here's the two things that I will do off the very top of the show, knowing guests are coming up, your tweets are coming up, your phone calls are coming up, whatever the case may be. But I wanted to make sure I acknowledged at some point, in the first segment of the show, at least early in the show, one retirement and one legend passing, and knowing that both of their times with teams I was either a fan of or covered or was simply a fan of when I was a kid, both of their times were very short, but both of these players left a very lasting impression. Let me start with the gentleman that passed away, and that would be the Cobra Dave Parker. Again, it was fitting that this happened during the Reds weekend where they honored the Big Red Machine, even though Dave played against those teams because he was playing for the Pittsburgh Pirates. But it serves as this historical marker. And it is the difference between myself and John being in this seat. There's an age gap, about 6 or 7 years between the two of us. So John can remember what it's like to have watched the Big Red Machine. Jeff Rickard, who did not grow up in the area but had family in the Cincinnati area, old enough to remember what it was like and going to watch the Big Red Machine. I grew up hearing stories about the Big Red Machine, but my Reds fandom started when they went like 61 and 101 in 1982. I grew up hearing about Pete Rose and Tony Perez and Joe Morgan and things like that, and seeing those guys play other places in their career. Now, obviously, I would see Pete and Tony end back up in Cincinnati and finish their careers there. But no, I grew up watching Eddie Milner and Gary Reedus and Paul Householder and Dan Dreesen and Cesar Cedeno. Still got to see David Concepcion, Ronnie Oster, etc. And I was hooked when that team won 61 stinking games. But it was Dave Parker's arrival in 84 that kind of signaled, hey, this team's not going to be bad forever. And I went back and looked up the numbers that Dave put up with the Cincinnati Reds over the course of 4 years and how he was north of like 115 RBI twice, had 125 runs batted in, led the league in doubles. You don't think that for a guy of that size and how he played. And the fact that he was an all-star pushing on the age of 40 when he played for the Milwaukee Brewers. Dave Parker was a hell of a player. And think about in Pittsburgh who the guy he had to replace. Like if there was one play that encapsulated how good Dave Parker could be, it was a throw in the All-Star game in the Kingdome in Seattle. I want to say it was 79 when he made that throw. Well, you know what else? You know, if you're kind of just randomly scrolling Facebook and you see these Facebook memories and moments start to pop up, you see Roberto Clemente making throws from right field for the Pirates. And it wasn't exactly a direct correlation. There was a year or two kind of gap before Dave became the everyday right fielder in Pittsburgh after Roberto's untimely passing on New Year's Eve of 1972. But think about how good you have to be the guy that's trying to replace Roberto Clemente in right field for the Pirates, and you did it for 10 years. And you were a part of a world championship team in 1979. And I'm sad that Dave will not be alive to take part in the Cooperstown ceremonies, a place that I'm sure Jake was talking about his trip there literally over the course of this weekend for that very cool trip that he takes each and every year. But Dave at least got to know that he was going in. And when you went back and looked at the stats before I got on the airwaves today, you go, damn, why did it take so long? So rest in peace to the Cobra. And the Boys Be Boppin' t-shirt that Super 70 Sports likes to tout. It was cool to see that kind of make the rounds from a social media standpoint as well. So I want to make sure I got to that off the top of the show. The other point that I wanted to make, Samurai says go to break. So that is exactly what we're going to do. Your telephone calls, 317-239-1070. Tweet me at Greg Rakestraw. We'll get to those in the next segment of the show, too. And in the next segment, we'll talk about the retirement of a guy that was here for all of 2 years, but I thought left a really good impression when he was here in Bojan Bogdanovic. We'll talk about that next. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
and calls you a I want you to be nice.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Sorry, Dalton. I can't do that. Somebody calls me that, gloves will be dropped. So you use that same phrase in Bull Durham, it's an automatic ejection. Same thing. Greg Rakestraw in for JMV. He gets a very well-deserved day off. I'm assuming he's back tomorrow because I'm sure he's on location someplace tomorrow. So, hence, John will be back on the show then. Until then, you're stuck with me. Really good guests for the better part of the next hour and a half. Me yapping. You can join the conversation if you'd like. 317-239-1070 at Greg Rakestraw on Twitter or X, whatever the case may be, if you'd like to have a quick conversation. I got to talking about Dave Parker in the opening segment of the program. The other person I wanted to make sure that I referenced here early in the show when he announced his retirement over the course of the weekend or in the last week was Bojan Bogdanovic. And to be honest with you, he has now been removed from playing for the Indiana Pacers for 6 years. That doesn't seem right, does it? But yes, that is the case. He was here for all of 2 years, 2 very productive years, 2 years when it looked like the Indiana Pacers were going to bottom out, and that did not happen. He was not officially part of the Paul George trade, but he was part of the group that was brought in with the cap space that basically got cleared by the Paul George trade. And in the 2 years that Bojan was here, first of all, he was durable, which sadly, unfortunately, was not the case at the end of the season. He played at about 2/3 of the games in 2023-24, have been trying to rehab a foot injury over the course of the last year and just realized, hey, I don't have it anymore. His retirement piece that he wrote was tremendous. And I don't have it in front of me. Basically goes, sometimes you choose the moment, sometimes the moment chooses you. This is the latter. My body is telling me I can't do this anymore. But Bojan, in his days with the Indiana Pacers, again, he was outstanding. Played in 161 of a possible 164 games. From a scoring perspective, Bojan during his time with the Pacers was tremendous on that front too. Was a guy that was just below, say, 18, 19 points per game. Probably had his best year the year after leaving the Pacers with the Utah Jazz. And when Bojan left Indiana, I think they would have liked to have kept him, but Bojan got like 3 years and $50-something million with the Utah Jazz. One of those things you were like, hey, good luck with that. Good for you. He got signed on a 2-year, $21 million deal when he came back here for the 2017-18, 2018, and 19 season. But Bojan in his days with the Pacers, 17 points per game in 2018, 20 points per game in 2019, 3-point shooting percentage, 40% in his first season, 42.5%, his best shooting numbers in his last season with the Indiana Pacers. It didn't lead to great playoff success. Pacers were one and done in both of his years in the playoffs. However, there's obviously that great series in 2018 where Oladipo and Sabonis and Bogdanovic and others took those guys to the hilt and took those guys to Game 7. And that season was so fun because there were absolutely zero expectations as part of that team. And that team ended up going 48-34 and got the absolute maximum out of what that group could do. Thad Young, Darren Collison, a young Miles Turner, Corey Joseph, Lance Stevenson still being a part of the mix of that team. I mean, it was a surprisingly fun ride for that group to get to 48 wins. And part of that is still what amazes me about what the Pacers were able to accomplish this go-round. And not just making as far as they did, but knowing kind of what the timeline of this group was. That we're 3 years removed from the Pacers being a 25-win team and having no hope. And you get to that point, you're like, I'm not sure how quickly this gets turned around. And all of a sudden, 2 years later, you're in the Eastern Conference Finals. And the year after that, you're playing Game 7 of the NBA Finals. And again, I realize that you don't let yourself enjoy this for too long because you immediately think about not having Tyrese Halliburton for next year. I am still in the appreciate it mode more than worrying about the next year mode. I'll get to that point at some point in time. I'm still basking in the afterglow of just how much fun that was, that all of us were getting behind the Indiana Pacers. And Kevin Pritchard has had, through no fault of his own and a couple of different times, been forced to reshuffle the deck when he wasn't planning on it. And in all of those times that he has had to do that, there's only one time that it truly bottomed out. And the time that happened, within 2 years, you're playing in the Eastern Conference Finals. So while the team that, Bojan Bogdanovic played on, there's like literally one piece of connective tissue from that team to who is playing now. And that being Miles Turner being a part of that team. Everybody else out doing something else at this point in time. But you know what? The connective tissue is the front office. Connective tissue is the fan base. And that first year that Bojan was here, that was such a wonderfully pleasant surprise. Because when Paul George was doing his thing, obviously before he got hurt, and that team had their run, everything has been about trying to find that next Reggie. Whether it was J.O., whether it was Paul, very briefly Victor Oladipo, and now clearly the closest thing to that appears to be a guy like Tyrese Halliburton. But part of the foundation for the success this group had was laid by that team that, again, their run was a year before then, kind of Victor got hurt, and then whatever kind of happens with him, and then you bring in, the TJ Warren group, and then you have COVID that hits, and, the team in the bubble that got run pretty quickly, and you flip it again. But even though Bojan was only here for a couple of years, I thought he had a really good run with the Indiana Pacers. I thought he had a really good run. So certainly worthy of a mention here. 317-239-1070 is the telephone number. You can tweet to me at Greg Rakestraw. You can also email the show to greg@1070thefan.com. Again, John back tomorrow. We have a loaded guest list. And during the course of the commercial break that just played, knowing another one is just a couple of minutes away, and when I was kind of going through guests, all right, who do I want to have on the show today, and different stories, and it became, all right, let's talk about things that I'm interested in. There's a buddy of mine that says it's easier to put interesting people on the radio than to make radio people interesting. And so my thought is, if there is a topic that I am interested in, I can convey that to you, and you might just get interested in said topic. Well, the fact of there's going to be this TBT that's going to be at Hinkle, which it was again last year. And the TBT is not exactly a new concept. I think it's been around for like a decade now at this point. And so you're used to seeing these alumni teams. Again, the Assembly Ball team, I think it's the All Good Dogs, I think is what they refer to as the Butler team. You literally just heard a commercial spot for, hey, get your tickets now. So I'm sure the sponsor will be very happy that I am mentioning this in terms of being on the show today, some 3 weeks out from the tournament. But though the IU team, the Butler team, aren't the only teams of local interest. And we'll talk about a team that, again, is being put together from guys that are doing everything they can to kind of break through and make it to a full professional level. And a big chunk of that effort happens in Lebanon, We'll explain when we come back on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Had a goalkeeper in the match I had Friday night, last name Shirley, and I kept trying to do the mental gymnastics in my mind. How do I get that line into play-by-play and then mention that there is a new Naked Gun coming out on August the 1st? I think Liam Neeson as either Frank Drebin or Frank's kid that's running the police squad, I think that is going to be genius. I don't get many Friday nights off. But I know I'm off that Friday night, and I think me and Mrs. Rakestraw are planning on going the theater to watch a movie, and I'm not sure the last time that's actually happened. This is not like a JMV level streak that dates back like a millennia ago to watch a new movie, but damn it, it's been a minute, and I think that's what we are going to do when that movie debuts. I literally remember watching the original with, of course, the line, "Nice beaver. Hey, thanks. Just had it stuffed." Back in like New Year's Eve of '88, the same day as the Fog Bowl between the Eagles and the Bears at Soldier Field, I went to go watch that movie at the Corden Twin Cinemas back in the day.
Did you manage to sneak the reference into the play-by-play?
I did not work in the nice beaver reference. No, I decided not to go that direction either. I did work in a reference to the Violent Femmes on Saturday night, and the Indy 11's top goal scorer is Elvis Amo. So for a second consecutive week, I worked at an Elvis Has Left the Building, knowing that the 48th anniversary of Elvis's last concert, which was at Market Square Arena, was last Thursday on June 26th. And for that, James, I say thank you. Thank you very much. All right, to the phone lines we go, to the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I got to remember what show I'm pinch hitting for today to make sure I get the proper sponsorship announcement. Chris Canal, he is the owner, one of the owners of the Lebanon Leprechauns, but he is also part of a group that has put together a team for the upcoming TBT at Hinkle Fieldhouse. The name of the team is the Go Time Green Machine. Chris, thanks for the time. How you doing today?
Good. Thanks, fellas, for having me on. Appreciate it.
Of course. All right, so Carmen's Crew is whom you're playing. That's an Ohio State alumni team. I've listed the IU and the Butler team. There's a Valparaiso University team as well. What exactly is the affiliation? How did your team get the name that it did? Where does your talent pool of players come from?
Yeah, so, the Lebanon Leprechauns were a pro team here that play in the TBL, and, everybody in professional basketball is aware of the TBT, and we started, a few players started talking about what it might look like to participate. And so another conversation I had with the St. Louis team, we talked about a collaboration, and so we went ahead and pulled the trigger, and we put a team in. And so the team name it's kind of a spinoff of the Leprechauns. Obviously, we're green. I say we're the low rent Celtics, and so we felt like that we needed something to keep that momentum. And so we play out of the Fieldhouse in Lebanon, and they have a really nice youth program. They call it Go Time, and so we did a partnership there, and so that's where the name Go Time comes from. And Green Machine is just is what we're going to try to be.
Understood. Winning that cash, I get that reference completely. So with that, how does and again the alumni teams make sense, and that's easy marketing, easy sell. You get an entire alumni base that wants to watch guys that suited up for them. They're the ones that are going to tune in, buy tickets, etc. How does somebody that doesn't have that make their way into the TBT?
Well, I think the TBT itself, started a dozen years ago, and it leans on the alumni teams. And kind of a sidebar, I just ran into Charlie Miller a few minutes ago, and everybody knows Charlie. He played his whole career there in Indiana, and has a place to come back to. And I think moving forward in the future, the alumni teams are going to get harder and harder to put together because we have guys moving around so much. And so I think the TBT is been around for a while, like I said, and I think they're trying to broaden the scope a little bit. I mean, social media has really changed amateur and professional basketball, NIL kind of right in the middle of it. And so, we had some conversations with the TBT, and it was kind of mutual. Both of us wanted to get together. And so what we did was, through the Midwest division, put an all-star team together, if you will, or really selected guys that we thought would really be, key players to help us be successful, and sprinkle in a few G League guys and maybe some guys from the Midwest that want to play as well.
All right, from a name recognition standpoint, the guy that would be most recognizable of the ones I've seen in your roster would be Robert Finnessy. Tell us about how you got him on the team.
Yeah, sure. Big shot Rob, right? Butler fans, Purdue fans know him. IU fans obviously know him. McCutcheon guy. He actually played in the TBL this season. I think Rob obviously has the ability to play at a pretty high level, and so we reached out to him and asked if he'd want to play with us, and he did. So we're pretty excited to have him.
All right. Without giving away what guys are making in your league from a financial standpoint, what would it mean to these guys financially if you make a deep run of the tournament? Just how, I wouldn't even say career-changing, but frankly, life-changing financially could a run in a tournament like this be for the guys that are playing for your team?
Yeah, I think it'd be huge, obviously. I think, there's a select few. I mean, the amount of players on NBA rosters, when you look at the amount of people in professional basketball, is very small. And it's always interesting to debate, and it's something maybe you guys could talk about a little bit on the show, is the difference between professional basketball and semi-professional basketball. A lot of guys that play in the TBL are professional basketball players, meaning that they're going in and out of Europe. They're playing maybe in Mexico, South America. They're playing professional basketball year-round, and they're making a living. So obviously it's not the same, living that we see the people on TV make. So obviously getting into the TBT and making a run and earning that grand prize is pretty eventful. But just as much as that is, the recognition, the ability, the opportunity to play. I mean, we got some guys. We got guys that played at Cincinnati. We got guys that played at UTEP, St. Bonaventure, Ole Miss. These guys are on our team this year. Some G League guys, but they love to play in front of fans at Hinkle. And be on TV. That's what really gets them going.
All right, part of the reason you're doing this, frankly, is so that more people know about the Lebanon Leprechauns. Because some have heard, others go, what in the world are you talking about? So this is your chance. Who are the Lebanon Leprechauns?
Yeah, so the TBL is a league that's been around about 8 years, started by Dave Magley, who's a 1978 Mr. Basketball from South Bend, played at Kansas, played in the NBA, has been around the block. And so they created this league to kind of be a league that goes coast to coast that sits right under the G League. And so Lebanon's, where we just finished our 4th season. Some people might be familiar, the Kokomo Bobcats. They just finished their 5th season. But there's teams from coast to coast, about 40 teams. And so, just an opportunity for people to know from March to May with the playoffs in June, you've got professional basketball, professional talent right up the road here in Lebanon. We play at the Farmers Bank Fieldhouse, and it's just amazing to me. I mean, my friends that may be high school coaches, people that are really around the game that don't even know we exist. And I think, that's one of our missions with the TBT is for people to lean in and see what we have going on. And win a few games along the way.
All right, so simply put, you basically got 2.5 weeks to get ready to begin this run to try to play for prize money. What sort of practice? What sort of get together? What are you doing between now and then? You have the official role of GM and assistant coach. What does that mean for these guys the next 15 or so days?
Yeah, sure. So Nate Griffin from St. Louis is going to serve as the head coach. Nate's had some success in the TBL. We're going to get together the week before. We're going to kind of have 2-a-days. We're going to play an exhibition game up here in Lebanon on that Wednesday night. The beautiful thing is we're the Hickory Huskers, right? We're the 8th seed in the bracket. We're playing the defending champs, Carmen's Crew, Ohio State alumni team, who won the whole thing last year. So as a coach, there's a lot of film, a lot of returning players. Beautiful thing. We've never played in it before. So hopefully we can spend some time as a coaching staff kind of getting prepared and get everything installed in a week. But, that's with all the teams. I don't think there are teams that are playing year-round to prepare for this tournament. I think a lot of teams are getting together a week or so in advance and just laying it on the line.
All right. For more information about your TBT team and your TBL team, where should folks go?
Yeah, sure. We're on social media, the internet, LebanonLeprechauns.com. You can also go to greenmachinebasketball.com, and you can see our landing page for our TBT. We've got a few more spots that we're securing. We brought in a few G League guys, and so we think we're going to have a strong team. So I just encourage people to come out. And who doesn't like the first round, guys? You got Butler and IU playing at 2 and 4. We're going to come in the evening session. So there's no reason why all the Indiana fans in the area can't get together and root on the underdog against those Ohio State alumni.
Chris, thanks for the time, buddy. Good luck, and I know we'll talk off the air soon. Thanks, my friend.
Gotcha. Thanks, everyone.
You got it. Chris Canal again, kind of to join us again from the Lebanon Leprechauns and the Go Time Green Machine. If time allows, I will kind of go through some of the players that you will be able to see from, say, like the IU and the Butler perspective. However, I have to say I am not surprised that Brian Kelly from the shop would be all over this, because as I was looking at the Go Time Green Machine team roster and looking at Carmen's crew, the Ohio State roster, I'm like, not a lot of dudes from Ohio State that I recognize on this team. BK's all over it. Carmen's crew only has like 3 former Buckeyes this year. So in name only, like William Buford is the guy that I recognized immediately from that group. We will double back to this if time allows, but from one unique guest to another. We occasionally will talk Louisville sports here because it's what I grew up with, but I've now lived more of my life here. But a guy, and again, because of the age of the internet that we are in, if you want to read about Indiana as an Indiana University, Rick Bozich is one of the guys you're going to go read. Well, he's got like 1 day left on the job. He retires tomorrow. He joins us next on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
with JMV.
I don't know what the hell's in there, but it's weird and pissed off, whatever it is.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
You know, this guy's writing career was firmly entrenched when this song first hit the charts. He's going for retirement, like as of tomorrow. And again, I'm not trying to age him, but I did grow up reading his work in the Louisville Courier-Journal. As of late, you have seen his work on WDRB.com. He and Eric Crawford did as good of a job as anybody, kind of finding a way to thread that needle from just the print world to both the print and broadcast world as well. And even though he has called the Louisville area home, he is always a region guy and an Indiana University guy at heart. It is Rick Bozich that joins us now on the Andy Moore Automotive Group Group Hotline. A day early, but happy retirement, my friend. How are you?
I'm good, Greg. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's good to talk to you guys, and I always keep track of what's going on in Indy. Things have calmed down a bit, I guess, since the NBA Finals. Just
a little bit over the course of the last 7 or 8 days, but frankly, it gives us a chance to have a conversation like this one. So I literally have Eric's piece that he put together a couple of weeks ago about your last day coming up tomorrow. Do you have an exit column kind of ready to go that you're going to hit send on at some point in time tomorrow?
Yeah, I put it in the system, I don't know, about an hour and a half ago. I put it to post tomorrow morning, but I told the web team that I'll leave that up to them. So I don't know when it's going to post. It might already be up, but I wrote 2,000 words, actually. It's a long, 50 years is a long time. I had a lot to say and a lot of people to thank. So I probably left a few out, but I thanked as many as I could.
Well, first of all, why is now the right time for you to step away?
Oh, the media life is very demanding. As you know, I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago on Monday, I remember Sly Stone had passed away, and I was like 6 o'clock in the evening, and I was trying to relax, listen to some Sly, read some stories about him. I'd already written my column and taped my TV segment, and something broke about Jeff Brom was hiring away one of Mark Stoops' top assistant coaches, and you know how it is that you have to drop everything you're doing and make a bunch of phone calls and write another story, and it's a time-consuming world, and it was time just to sort of, move into a slower lane and enjoy myself a little bit more.
Of the 50 years you do this professionally, how many of those were spent in the Louisville market?
I got here in 78, July of 1978. I came here from Bob Hamill. I came back to Bloomington. Well, I graduated from IU in 75. I went to Anderson for a year and a half. Then I went back to Bloomington for a year and a half and was a part-timer in sports, and then actually was a City Hall reporter for a year there. And then I came to Louisville in 78, actually as a sports copy editor, which those jobs don't even exist anymore. Nobody reads stories for punctuation or grammar or factual accuracy, but you wrote headlines and cut captions for pictures. And after a year of doing that, I covered high school sports for a year. I covered UK for a year, and then in 81, I became a columnist at the Louisville Times, which went out of business 5 years later.
I was going to say, when you went to Louisville, what was your plan as to how long you were going to be there before you went to someplace bigger or went back to Indiana, tried to go back home to the region, et cetera? What was the plan originally going to the Derby City?
I thought I'd be out of here in 2 years. And I had a couple of nibbles and stuff, but the places that wanted me, I didn't really want to go. And I remember the LA Times contacted me, and they ended up hiring Mike Litwin and Mark Heisler and Alan Greenberg, three really good guys who were older and more experienced than I was. And I got the column in 81, and then I actually took a job in Minneapolis in 1986 for 2 days. And when I got up there, I left New Albany. It was 72 degrees on Halloween weekend on Thursday. And when I got to Minneapolis Friday night, it was 29 degrees. And after having grown up in the Gary area, I knew what those winters were like and decided that maybe I made a mistake. And fortunately, the Courier let me come back, and been here ever since. And it's the best place for me because I'm a big college basketball fan. And for my money, this
Sure.
place is the best place to be in the country for college basketball, because you've got Louisville, which is now in the ACC. You've got Kentucky, which is in the SEC, and Indiana in the Big Ten. So you get a look at the three of the four best conferences in the country.
No, you're in the hub. There is no doubt about that. One of the things that I instruct people when they are coming to work in Indianapolis, and whether it's an intern or speaking to high school kids, college kids, or somebody that is new to the market, I go, you had better learn the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, you had better pay attention to IndyCar, and you better learn quick. The same thing happens if you work in Louisville. Figure out Churchill Downs in a hurry. Know horse racing. Know the 3-year-old crop. So what was that indoctrination process like for you when you first got to Louisville?
It was rough because, like I said, growing up in Gary, all I knew about horse racing was the feature race at Arlington Park, which they throw on the stretch drive of the feature race every night on the news. And then, I watched the Derby and I watched the Preakness some, but I didn't really understand all the different facets of racing and how fascinating it really is, because the jockeys and trainers and owners all have stories to tell, and they're all very, usually very colorful people. So I had to learn, and racing has its own language of its own, and that takes time, and the history of the sport. And it took me a long time to really feel comfortable with it, because the problem is when you're here, if you make a mistake, the people that really know the game will let you know that.
And the other thing, too, is that when you work in television, you work as a radio play-by-play guy, you work as a print guy, you're not used to living life at 5 in the morning. If you're going to cover horse racing, you had better be in the barns at about that time. What was that adjustment like for you?
Terrible, and it was terrible to the very end. I'm not a morning person. And being out there, changing my sleep cycle, it wasn't good. And you're right, you do have to be out there early to see the works, and a lot of times talk to the trainers, and the people that are racetrack people have my forever respect, because there are no days off in horse racing for the people that really do it right. Even the trainers that do it right, they might take an occasional Sunday off. They might take 1 week vacation a year, but the really good ones, they work every day, and that's the way it is.
The soon-to-be retired Rick Bozich, WDRB in Louisville, of course, longtime Louisville Courier-Journal writer and columnist. Again, Gary native, Indiana University graduate, joining us here on the Andy Moore Automotive Group Hotline. I'm Greg Rakestraw, filling in for JMV on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. I want to take a detour just because we're talking horse racing. I'll get back to you in a moment, but obviously let's mention the passing of D. Wayne Lucas, and everybody kind of knew about that over the last few days, that this was going to happen. For those that maybe only know horse racing tangentially or pay attention when it's going to be Derby Day, what sort of giant just passed in the horse racing business?
I mean, I would compare him to a Belichick or a Wooden or any of those type people. He changed the game in so many different ways, in terms of he was one of the first guys that would fly horses all over the country to put them in races. He was able to recruit owners with the means to go to the horse sales in Lexington and Saratoga and buy some of the top young horses in the world at a time when European people or people in the Middle East were buying them. And he was a great spokesperson for racing, in terms of he was very media savvy, very media friendly, and could talk about the game in language that the average sports fan could understand. He didn't talk about it, in the lingo of what they call a hard boot trainer. He was the modern guy, and so many of his. If you look at horse racing now, some of the top trainers like Todd Pletcher and Mike Maker and Dallas Stewart, Karen McLaughlin, Michael McCarthy all came up through the D. Wayne Lucas barn.
Are you, being a person that cut his teeth as a college student covering Bob Knight, were you at all surprised that those guys were such fast friends in Bob and D. Wayne?
No, and I had to remind myself to watch what I said about Coach Knight or Coach Lucas. Yeah, he was a big fan. He talked to him quite a bit all through his entire life. In fact, I was looking through pictures the other day, and there was a picture of D. Wayne wearing an IU baseball cap. So, yeah, they were legit good friends.
Was the last controversial piece that you wrote one that said, hey, Louisville, this is what you could learn from the city of Indianapolis?
Yes. Yeah, they didn't like that. Some people did, but some people didn't. And I stand by that. I've thought that way for a long time. As I mentioned in that piece, two big movers and shakers in Louisville, the one time I'd written it earlier, called me into the in a boardroom and kind of lectured me about quit writing that because the cities weren't comparable. And they're even less comparable now. And Nashville's another one. You know, anybody who leaves Louisville and goes south has to drive through Nashville, and there's always a huge traffic jam because there's so many construction cranes there, and there are no construction cranes in downtown Louisville.
John Y. Brown, one of his sons, responded to that column. Is that an accurate statement?
That's correct. He sent me a very nice but very poignant email. And a guy by the name of David Vance, who was the general manager of the Colonels in '75, who also sent me a letter saying that I needed to know the whole story.
Rick Bozich, WDRB, again set to retire after 50 years in the business. Joining us here, Greg Rakestraw filling in for JMV. He's joining us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. All right, let's look at this in reverse. That you wrote a great column as to, hey, Louisville, you could take your cue from Indianapolis. What are some things that we here in central Indiana might be able to look 100 miles to our south and say, you know what, maybe these are things we could pick up from Kentuckiana?
You know, the one thing that I will always give Louisville high marks for is they do big events well.
Yeah.
And whether it's the Derby every year, which is always a fabulous success, and people come here from all over the world, and the entertainment of them, the celebrities that come is top shelf. They've done the PGA Championship's been here 3 times. It's always been very successful. The Ryder Cup was here one time. That was a tremendous success. We had the NCAA volleyball championships here back in December. The NCAA seemed to really appreciate that. So that would be the main thing. Just Louisville does a really good job at big events. We don't get enough of them, man.
What has it been like to have Alex try to follow in your footsteps, or at least kind of walk your path as a writer?
It's been surprising because, as I mentioned, it's in the column tomorrow, that it was actually my daughter who had a journalism degree from IU, and Alex was in political science, and she got out of journalism quickly and went into sales, and he decided with Eamon Brennan and Ryan Carrazza to start Inside the Hall it was the year that Sampson got in trouble. So was that 2007 maybe?
2008, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and that's when they started Inside the Hall, and it's been around still now for 17 or 18 years later. So I stay out of his way, and he stays out of my way, and we get along fine.
Everybody that sets a retirement date, usually there is a big trip that is planned, something that you haven't had the time to do. And obviously, you traveled a great deal for your jobs. Maybe it's a little bit different. Is there a big trip coming up for the Bozich family?
Well, my wife and I are going to somewhere in North Carolina in a couple of weeks for a vacation to get out of the heat. But for me, the big one's going to be go to spring training in March.
Yeah,
I'm a big White Sox fan, and even though they're only the second worst team in baseball this year, thanks to Colorado, I will be out at Camelback Ranch next year for about a week watching White Sox baseball.
That is something that I have never been able to do because we're all a little busy in the month of March around here. So I'm nodding my head accordingly along with you. A favorite person you had to cover, a favorite person you got to talk to, if there was a guy that you were going to go to, you knew I was going to get a great quote from this person, who would that be during your time doing this job?
The two people always ask me that. The two people that I've really were two of my favorites. One was Jim Fregosi, who was a former baseball all-star who managed actually here in Louisville for 3.5 years before he went to the White Sox. And in the early years here, baseball, they drew 1 million fans the second year the team was here. And I love baseball. He loved baseball. And I would go out there and talk to him all the time. And I had a great time talking to Jim Fregosi. And the other person who I've actually admired the most and enjoyed covering was Mary T. Maher, who was a swimmer here from Louisville who set the world record in the butterfly in the 100 and 200 meters. And
First time around in the 80s, she was denied a chance when she was in her prime to go to the Olympics because Jimmy Carter wouldn't let the U.S. go to Russia. And she came back 4 years later and went to L.A. and won 3 gold medals. And people say big deal because the East Germans weren't there and the Russians weren't there. And then she trained for 4 more years and went to Seoul, South Korea, and did it again. And I always admired the heck out of her for that's real determination and sticking with a challenge.
Well, what was it like for you to make that transition again? Because you still wrote a heck of a amount. You just talked about it. Hey, at the very end, I've got to drop what I'm doing and start writing this new piece about coach moving from one team to the other. But again, you adapted quicker than most in terms of getting in front of a camera, and you had a staff that was wonderful about walking you through, because you and I have had that conversation about being a part of the Sports Writers and Sportscasters Hall of Fame. What was it like making that jump to television as well 13 years ago?
You know, the people at WDRB were phenomenal. They told us in advance what they wanted to do and how they planned to do it, and they lived up to all the promises that they made. They made it real easy for us. And Eric and I had done a web show for the Courier-Journal before we left and went to the TV station, and this was just one that was produced at a much higher level and had learned to look at cameras and put on makeup and all that good stuff. But it was – I enjoyed it. It was tremendous. I'll miss doing that part of the job.
Final thing before we let you go, you still going to kind of write for kind of your own accord, or are you going to try to take a break and step away from that even if nobody's going to be reading them anymore?
You know, I'm going to take a break for a little while. I haven't really decided yet what I'm going to do going forward. A couple of people have reached out to me and said, hey, are you interested in doing anything? And maybe, I don't know, it's going to be stuff that I want to do, not that stuff to have to do. Some people talk to me about doing a Substack. I know that Kravitz has one, and Paul Doherty has one in Cincinnati. I don't know how much work that is. I probably need to talk to Bob and see if he thinks it's worth it or not. Scott Agnes, I know, has one, which I think is Alex told me was popular, and Galen Clavio has one doing IU stuff. So. But I don't know at this point. People have asked me that, and I said, well, I haven't stopped yet. Until I'm stopped for a while, I don't know really if I want to keep doing it or not. I might enjoy actually letting my brain calm down a little bit.
There you go. We'll take a break, my friend. You have earned it. 50 years is one hell of a run, especially in an industry that has been fighting that for some time. Congrats, Rick, and I really appreciate your time this afternoon.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Greg. I hope to see you soon.
You will, buddy. Rick Bozich, again, WDRB, Fox 41 in Louisville. And again, I have now spent more of my life in central Indiana than I did in southern Indiana. But I'm getting goosebumps thinking about this. I grew up reading his work in the Courier-Journal. Same for Pat Forty. And when I have a chance to see the guys that have done this for a long time, it's still a thrill for me. So a couple of years ago, and maybe it's even more than a couple of years ago now, Fred Calgill, who is no longer at 32, but was there for 30-plus years in Louisville, came into the studios here and was looking for a place to record something, and he introduced himself and I'm like, buddy, I know who you are. I started watching you when I was in the 4th grade. Bob Dominy was the guy on Wave TV in Louisville for years. Bob briefly did a radio show in Louisville, and I was over the moon when I had a chance to be on his radio show. So Rick's good people. And Rick always carried the flag for the state of Indiana, for Indiana University, and being a region guy, even though kind of like in reverse. I grew up in that area, and now I've spent more of my life here, not in northern Indiana, but same thing for Rick. Always strong to his region roots, but clearly has spent 47 years now being in Kentuckiana, and at that age, is not going to change. But one of the things that I really, when I knew I was going to do this show, and I've known for about a week or so that I was hosting, and I kind of started going through, all right, you never, kind of like when you're a writer, the writer's brain never shuts off. It's kind of why I asked that last question. You have to have a creative outlet. And even though I have not done a daily sports, good Lord, I can't believe I'm saying this. I have not done a daily sports talk show in 16 years. Now, I still do the post-game show, obviously. I have done a weekly soccer show now for 11 years, and I do this show just to kind of keep the tools sharp because you never know. There's branding. It's nice to be a part of the conversation. I have an ego. I bury it most of the time, but trust me, it's there. but I did a daily show for 9 years. I largely think I'm probably done with it, but you never know. But I bring all of that up for this reason. Whenever I know that I'm going to be doing this show, I immediately put my talk show brain back on, and James knows exactly what I'm talking about. Just thinking, all right, I'm going to do this show. What are my topics today? Who are the guests I can have on today? Who do I think I can make interesting radio with? But there is also the thing of having this platform and saying, you know what? I kind of want to give a guy just a little bit of a send-off or a tip of the cap for a job well done. And to be able to be in one market of that size for that long and be relevant. Again, he was a columnist slash, whether you want to say columnist now or opinion piece, he was the voice or the print voice of that town for 45 years, one of them. And at some point, you kind of get that elder statesman status. Like, all right, on a bit of a slower day, here is a chance for me to recognize someone who so richly deserves it. Rick, congratulations. Enjoy retirement. And, you've invested so much time in the White Sox, they'll come around at some point in time. I say that as a Reds fan that hasn't seen a championship in 35 years. At some point in time, it's going to come around. Right? Right. All right, we're going to get to break a little bit early just because I want to make sure I give a little extra time for a guy that is on the very front end of maybe one of those careers. Rick is writing up a 50-year writing career like as of tomorrow. My next guest is not in his first year as a broadcaster, but is in his first year as one of, I think there are 32 NHL teams at this point. Maybe it's 31. I've lost track. But there was a first-year team in Utah, and he was a first-year NHL play-by-play voice. His name is Mike Folta, and he will join us next. Greg Rakestraw filling in for JMV. It is The Ride on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
We have the holy hand grenade.
Yes, of course. The holy hand grenade of Antioch.
Right.
1, 2, 5.
Freezer.
3.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
The hit parade just keeps on coming. Again, this is also what you do when, A, you got a substitute teacher to do this all the time, and B, it's kind of a slower time of year. You can kind of go in a divergent path. Now, frankly, hockey is actually part of the conversation today in Indianapolis, which you say, like in June, never. But it's part of the conversation because Indianapolis was linked as, hey, there are potential expansion markets that are interested. I'm not so sure about that. We'll get more on that in the kind of back half of this segment. But you know what? There is somebody from a hockey standpoint I kind of wanted to talk to. And he just happened to text me this morning and said, hey, why don't you call me back? I've got an offer for you. 10 minutes of airtime for no charge whatsoever. I think it's worth the price. Joining us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, his name is Mike Folta. He is both a Fishers grad and a Purdue grad. But these days, he is the radio voice of the Utah Mammoth. And yes, that's the newly rechristened hockey team, formerly known as the Phoenix Coyotes. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Greg, coming to you live from the Wasatch Front. It is sunny. It is 90 degrees, and we are in the high desert, my friend, a long way from the Wabash Valley, but it's good to talk to you.
Absolutely it is. And I was going to ask you earlier, whether you were back in Indianapolis for the summer. You spent time in Rockford, maybe in northern Illinois. No, you dropped a mountain reference immediately in the conversation. Yep, I guess my friend is out in Utah. So we'll kind of work backwards here. How is living in Utah treating you?
Well, there's altitude. So anytime I do go back home, it smacks me in the face as soon as I get off the plane in Salt Lake City. It's hard to forget the mountains because they're all around you. I don't know if you've ever been out to SLC, but you're surrounded by mountains constantly, and you're seeing a lot more NHL logos around town here because the Utah Mammoth used to be the Utah Hockey Club last year. Now we had the rebrand. We're the Utah Mammoth, and so we're making a lot of hockey fans out of Utah Jazz fans and BYU and University of Utah football fans. So we're in the conversion business as we speak.
All right. So how does a young man that played football at Fishers, went to college at Purdue, how does that guy say, you know what, hockey is where I want to make my living?
Well, playing football is a generous way of putting it.
You were on the team.
I participated, yeah, special teams hero. Well, I love broadcasting. I actually got my start broadcasting in high school, doing high school basketball, as one does in Indiana, and love doing that. I continued my broadcasting passion at Purdue, and I was fortunate because Purdue, there's some great people that work in the communications school there, but it's not the same as at Indiana University or even Butler when it comes to the amount of students that are interested in journalism. And so I got to broadcast a lot of games, not because I was good, but because they needed a warm body in that seat. And so I got to call some games with you, Greg, or at least participate in some of those broadcasts with the ISC network. Had a ton of fun doing those, but had always loved hockey, just didn't play it growing up. And then I graduated during COVID, and minor league hockey was one of the few things that was still continuing during that time. And I just kind of kept taking one chance after another. And God bless the broken road that led me here to Salt Lake City. And now we're living large in the NHL and having a lot of fun.
All right, so my friend was in Rockford, and for those that know the Blackhawks organization, Blackhawks NHL, Rockford is in the AHL, then it is the Indy Fuel in the ECHL in terms of kind of the pyramid as far as the Blackhawks are concerned. So much like any player in Major League Baseball wants to go from AAA to the majors, so too do the broadcasters want to go from the AHL or ECHL to a gig in the National Hockey League. So when you found out that you were going to be the new voice of the Utah Hockey Club at the time, this is where you got to put your play-by-play verbosity skills together here. What was that feeling like about a year ago?
Oh, I hit my knees, Greg. It was hard to imagine, and I had a great situation in Rockford, and I was sad to go, but yeah, it's what you work for, and I rode the bus for a couple of years, and there are certainly guys who have rode it longer and are still putting in their time, but I was fortunate to put those bus riding days behind me, but there were a lot of nights of pulling into Des Moines, Iowa at 3 o'clock in the morning and helping the equipment guys hang up sweaty jock straps and things like that. And that's, you kind of learn to love it. And I'm certainly appreciative of the things that I've learned and the people I've met along the way. But there's something to be said for taking the charter plane city to city in the NHL. It's a pretty unique experience, and I'm very, very fortunate, and I'm here not as a testament of my own ability, but of the wisdom of those around me. So very, very blessed, and it's not lost on me, the journey that it's taken to get here.
One of the things that you talk about as a professional athlete is, and I can literally hear all of these conversations I have with football players that are rookies or new to the Colts, et cetera, the speed of the game. Obviously, hockey is a game as you're trying to get all of these names and descriptions and to the point, to the wing, to the back, et cetera, that is tremendously quick at any level. What was that adjustment like for you to go from a very good league in the AHL to now describing National Hockey League action on the fly? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. The speed does increase, but you also have a smoother rhythm of play in the NHL. Players are better, so everything is tape to tape. Every pass is where it should be. So it's almost easier in a sense because it's a little easier to predict, even though the action is a lot quicker. I think the hardest part, and Greg, I'm sure you've dealt with this plenty over the course of your career, in a lot of these big NHL buildings, sometimes our broadcast perch is a county over. And like in United Center in Chicago, I mean, you're basically calling that thing from the West Loop. Like it is, you need binoculars to see this little tiny black puck, and then players that are constantly changing, and half of them are from Czech Republic or Slovakia or Russia. So you got to pronounce all that, and you can't even tell which number is which number. And so I've made plenty of mistakes in identifying key players, that's for sure. But I think moving further away has been the harder part than keeping up with the pace of the game.
By the way, to your point, I'm watching the Gold Cup last night, and I'm watching Team USA and the Canada match before that, and it's at U.S. Bank Stadium, the home of the Minnesota Vikings. And I was fortunate enough to do a preseason game there 4 years ago. And that stadium is wonderful, and that broadcast location is garbage. So I judge NFL stadiums completely by where they put preseason television from a road perspective. Like Buffalo is so old and throwback, and I hate the fact this is their last year for that stadium, because we get to do the broadcast on the 50-yard line. It's literally me, a glass partition, and the guy that had the PGA Tour call on Andrew Catalan. We're sitting in the same booth. They just divide the network booth in two. We have this wonderful location. So when the Colts have played in Buffalo a bunch, I absolutely love it. Minnesota, the stadium, gorgeous. I was calling it from basically the back of the end zone. Like, that's no bueno. So trust me, I understand exactly what you are talking about. Is there anybody in doing this that you have had the chance to meet and go, oh, bleep, I can't believe I just met this person?
Ooh, that's a great one. Honestly, all of our NHL players and NHL staff, a lot of these characters are larger than life once you get up to it. I can't think of anybody I've met. Maybe how about Kenny Albert?
There you go.
Kenny Albert calls every sport known to man. And then I work with Eddie Olczyk's son, Nick. And so to be able to develop a relationship with Eddie Olczyk, who's on so many TV broadcasts for so many years now, and of course had an incredible career, to get to build that relationship more than just broadcaster, but broadcaster and the father of someone I'm close to, like, that's really special as well. We've got a great broadcast team, and the camaraderie amongst broadcasters, especially in the NHL, is really special, because a lot of us have worked through the minors or done things that we would have rather not done to get here, but we made it all the same. And it's special to call games alongside those guys, even though I'm still begging, borrowing, and stealing ideas from those characters.
the best idea, so you can take this on with you as well, and I feel terrible I have forgotten his name. But I was friends with the guys on the Columbus Blue Jackets radio network in their infancy, like 20-plus years ago. And their play-by-play guy had one of the most ingenious ideas I have ever seen as a broadcaster. He would take out the equivalent of what would be like a Denny's or a diner menu and didn't need to see the moons over my hammy, so he took out the pieces of that. And he would have all of these different synonyms. In other words, I don't want to say the same thing over and over again during a broadcast. How can I possibly do something different? So he had 20 different ways to describe a singular term or action in a hockey game, and he would look down at those every once in a while just to make sure he was saying things differently. I'm like, that is freaking genius, and I still haven't used it to this day, but I still respect the idea that it was. All right, so the conversation for you and I began off the air today with a text of going, hey, Indianapolis is an NHL market, huh? Your thoughts about that news of at least a link between Indianapolis and the National Hockey League?
Well, if Indy gets an NHL team, I'll be the first to jump on that bandwagon and bang the drum. There's a lot that has to go into it, and there's been a lot that has been going into it for other cities like Atlanta and Houston, where they're already getting these ownership groups together and they have these plans in place and they're having votes for new arenas and things like that. So I think Indy is significantly behind some of those bigger major cities that I just mentioned. But being here in Utah, it's an interesting spot because the NHL is relatively new to Utah, and it's taken a lot of buy-in from obviously the ownership group, Ryan and Ashley Smith, who are the founders of Qualtrics, a survey data collection company, but also from the entire city. It's taken the political powers that be to move things around so that basically in a 5-6 month span, this city would ready itself for an NHL game. Greg, I was there for morning skate, which is like shoot around, right? In the morning skate of opening night, so opening morning, and they're still screwing TVs into the hallway, like in the player hallway. They were doing construction on the arena up until puck drop, essentially, and so it takes a ton of effort to bring an NHL team to a city, but when you have the buy-in that we've been fortunate to have here in Utah, the results can be spectacular. We were sold out all season long. Hockey wasn't big in Salt Lake City before. It's kind of like Indy, where there had been a minor league team, but never an NHL team. And yes, it is a winter sports haven. They've had the Olympics here in 2002 previously, but hockey wasn't big. Well, now that's changing. And the investment in not just the team, but in the community aspects and the community rinks and things like that from our ownership group has been spectacular. And that's what you need to make an NHL team stick in a city. And one thing too, it's also easier for these expansion teams to be, it's easier for them to be successful than it was before. You look at Vegas, you look at Seattle, teams that were competitive early on. That can help a lot, especially when you compare it to the Atlanta Thrashers that made the playoffs once and never won a single playoff game in 11 years.
No doubt.
Keep all that in mind, but I would love to be an Indy Racers fan or whatever it is. Just let's not trade away Wayne Gretzky this time.
No, or Mark Messier, either of the two. Keeping those level players would be good. Check that off. If there's someone like those guys, please keep them on the roster this time. Mike, it's a pleasure. Don't be a stranger on the air or off the air. All right, we'll talk soon.
As we say in Utah, tough shop. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, I don't even know what he said, but thank you. I think that's a good thing. Mike Fulton, again, Fishers grad, Purdue grad, hockey announcer in the National Hockey League. Been wanting to have that conversation for some time, and that hockey discussion allowed that to happen. I might offer my thoughts on this, and obviously I am linked to the other sport that has talked about expanding to Indianapolis in terms of soccer. We'll do that as well. And I'm going to tell you what you should be doing on Thursday, August 7th. That and more in a moment. 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
and the beat goes on. 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
What are you doing on August 7th? I know what I'll be doing. I'll be in Baltimore. I'm getting ready to call the preseason opener for the Indianapolis Colts against the Baltimore Ravens. But if I was not there, I know where I would be. I'd be at the Legends Golf Club. That is 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. The Fan Invitational Golf Outing. Tee time at 10 a.m. Jeff Rickard, Kevin Bowen, JB, Jay Query, JMV will all be there. Again, Thursday, August 7th, 10 a.m., the Legends Golf Club. And I was very fortunate earlier in my career, and I still have a good friendship with Ted Bishop, who has run the Legends for years. One of my favorite golf courses. Used to play that course all the time. Frankly, need to go back down there and play it again because it's been too damn long. Normally, I would be all over that event. I will be on the Eastern Seaboard. I'll be having Old Bay seasoning at some point in time on something. Crab cakes and football. That's what I'll be doing on August the 7th. But unless you're going to make the trip to Baltimore with me, you should be at the Legends of Indiana in Franklin for the 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan golf outing. 317-239-1070 telephone number. Best way to hit me up is probably on Twitter, at Greg Rakestraw, because I've got like 3 or 4 minutes here before I got to get to a break. Stephen Holder at 5 o'clock. Scott Agnes will be joining us at about 5:25 or so. Nothing new from a Pacers standpoint yet. But again, it's really about one move that we expect to take place. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when and at what dollar figure. And I've told people, there are multiple ways to join the show, and I just gave you some of them. The other would be, as I refer to all the time, the bat phone. You know how to get a hold of me. I'm probably going to respond to you, not in an actual text, but by telling you this over the radio, assuming you are still listening. So my friend Brant asks me, should Miles Turner take less money to keep options open for the Pacers to sign free agents? No, they're already at the salary cap. And this is why I became a sports fan, right? To learn things about the first apron and the second apron and the hard cap and salary cap, right? Trust me, it's a good thing because it's what allows markets like Indianapolis and Oklahoma City to be competitive with the Lakers and Knicks and Clippers and Celtics and Sixers and things of that nature. The Pacers, and just because of contracts they have already got committed, and knowing that Benedict Matherin's coming up and Aaron Nesmith's about to come up and Obi Toppin is not far away from that. Now, the Pacers team is what the Pacers team is going to be. And I think that also applies to being what they're going to be without Tyrese Halliburton as well. I just think that it's, even with the Tyrese injury, it's still cut and dry. You are rewarding Miles Turner for being an integral part of your franchise for 10 years. That is still valued here. Not just by the Indiana Pacers organization, but by you, the Indiana Pacers fan base. And again, is this team without Tyrese Halliburton going to be as good as they were from January 1 on? Probably not. But do I still think this is a playoff team next year? Absolutely. Again, how many teams that lose a player like Halliburton have 2 point guards you can already insert into the lineup in Andrew Nembhard and TJ McConnell? You've got it. For Benedict Matherin, I think he is likely playing for a contract extension someplace else or getting paid as a free agent someplace else. But in a situation where it was, hey, you go to being the sixth man and your minutes might vary. You might be playing 15, you might be playing 25. That all depends on how hot of a hand you got. Now you hand him the ball and say, buddy, you got 30, 32 minutes a night. Shots are not going to be an issue for you going forward. You're going to have to go create. You're going to have to go be more of an offensive threat. Not that he has any problem in his own confidence and believing that. You've now got space. You've now got Jarris Walker that has more of a defined role. I think with one obvious exception, I think the 2025-26 Indiana Pacers are going to look a lot like the 2024-25 Indiana Pacers. Are they going to have the same level of success? It's going to be difficult, but it's not impossible. I don't think that you're going to have this huge change in philosophy about the team, and let's run it back. Let's have this continuity. I don't think it changes even in the face of losing your franchise player in a best-case scenario for most of next year. I don't think they're at an inflection point kind of like the Celtics were, where the Celtics have made some major changes. I don't think the Pacers are there. I think the Pacers will largely run it back. Just without the guy wearing getting much playing time next year. And so to answer your question, Brant, I don't think it's about, saving money to bring other free agents in. Because you're going over the cap. You are trying to reward Miles Turner. And by doing that, you show the other guys in the locker room on this team, hey, we take care of our own here. And again, I think the roster looks very similar next year to what it looked like this year. And even without Tyrese Halliburton, I still think that's a good thing. We'll talk more about that with Scott Agnes in the 5 o'clock hour of the show. When we come back, a little Colts conversation. Training camp is like 3.5 weeks away. Like 3 weeks from Wednesday, there will be activity at Grand Park in Westfield. And the man patrolling the sidelines, as he had for many years, is Stephen Holder. And he'll join us next on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Ride with JMV.
We're not going to fall for a banana in the tailpipe.
You're not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe?
It should be more natural, brother. It should flow out like this. Look, man, I ain't falling for no banana in my tailpipe.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Greg Rakestraw in for JMV. He gets a day off. One of these days, Stephen Holder will get some time off because he's got like 3 weeks to get whatever vacation days he's got left in for 2025. You ready for training camp, my friend?
No, absolutely not. I am, though, for the record, I am taking time off as we speak. So I have, let's see, I got away last week and I'll be gone again next week. So yeah, this is my time of year, man.
Well,
that's all I got.
I know you kind of got pulled in a basketball direction as well for a few weeks. How many games were you on the payroll for to cover for the playoffs?
Not as many as I suspected there might be, but I got a handful, and I got enough to get a little flavor of the postseason, which I hadn't had in a long time. So I was okay with it. I would say some of the first series, a little bit of the finals in Eastern Conference. So yeah, I'm fine. I got my share of that, just enough so that I could still squeeze in the rest of my summer.
Good. All right, here's the Journalism 101 question today. How is a football beat and a basketball beat completely different animals?
Wait, I cut out there for a second. Is there a?
I basically said, how different is covering a basketball team versus covering a football team?
So I actually think that this is something that maybe only media can pick up on.
Sure.
But I actually feel like you get way more personality in the NBA, which I love as a reporter, right? Those guys, they've got the guaranteed contracts. It's very much much more of an individual sport, not an individual sport, but there are more individual stars, I guess, star-driven sport. In the NFL, I've always felt like you walk into an NFL locker room and it's like it's almost like you're dealing with I don't know. It's just such a serious place, I feel like sometimes. And I know as a fan you probably want that. I don't want that. I want guys to be laid back and relaxed. And I feel like, when the NBA is the frat house and then you go to your professor's office hours, and that's the NFL.
I get that.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I've lived in both, and I kind of understand that to a certain degree. All right, now it's obviously been 2-3 weeks since we've had any interaction with guys on the Indianapolis Colts. The obvious question is about the quarterback position. So since you've covered Anthony Richardson for the last couple of years plus, just kind of quick thoughts on interactions with Daniel Jones and what you saw from him at kind of the first offering in a Colts uniform.
Yeah, I think Daniel Jones is definitely a serious guy, in keeping with the theme just now. I think that's the sense that I get from talking to other guys about him, is that he works. He's going to be on the ball when it comes to knowing what he's got to do. I think he's from a preparation standpoint and from a Monday through Saturday perspective, right? I think he is exactly what you want. Question is always going to be on Sunday with him, right? Yep. Can he step in there and make the throws and make the plays? But I think all we have right now is Monday through Saturday. We only have that aspect right now. And from that perspective, he is a really good guy to have in your building. Everything indicates that. I actually think in that regard, this maybe could have a good benefit, or could have a benefit for Anthony Richardson, to see another perspective and another person do it. I mean, he's had that before, clearly, with Joe Flacco and Gardner Minshew to a degree. But Daniel Jones is a guy who's still fighting for his own opportunity, and for his own career. So it's a little bit different in that regard. So, I think what I would say also with Daniel Jones, I think Jonathan Taylor pointed this out. earlier in the offseason, and he was really surprised by it. Maybe I am less so, but he said, this guy is way more athletic than I ever envisioned. and it stuck with me. And I don't know what he expected, but I do think we have, dismissed the athletic ability of Daniel Jones to a degree. And because we know that Shane Steichen is a guy who will leverage that if he can. So anyway, something to think about and to keep in the back of your head.
All right, more on Daniel Jones, and I promise we'll go back to Anthony Richardson coming up in a matter of moments. Do you think Jones is in a better position to succeed with the Colts than he was with the Giants?
I do. And the reason is, and the Colts believe this too, the supporting cast.
Okay.
Now, I am not saying that the Colts are threatening to win a Lombardi this year. However, if you go back and look at the wide receivers that Daniel Jones played with, I think outside of maybe his first season, it's pretty bad. I mean, it's shockingly bad. Okay. I think the last couple of years they brought in obviously a top 5 pick. So that beefed things up a little bit, but his supporting cast, I think he had Saquon certainly for a time, but there was, I can't remember, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I think it was maybe 2 years ago, outside of Saquon, I don't know who else was on that offense. I mean, it was pretty bad. And then couple that with an offensive line that was not very reliable. So I am not one that's going to sit here and tell you that Daniel Jones is the answer. Okay, that the Colts have to show me before they tell me, because we've been through this with quarterbacks with them before. But I do think if you're comparing scenarios and situations, I think Daniel Jones is in a better situation here. If he wins the job, I think he's got a better shot to have success here.
If he wins the job. So obviously that kind of transitions to the next point. And this is all about your tremendous reporter skills in terms of what, if anything, have we learned about Anthony Richardson's injury status from the last time we all got together out at West 56th Street about 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Well, all indications are that he'll be fine until it happens again, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, is it going to happen again is the question. And I don't think this particular instance is going to be problematic. The question is going to be, what do we not know? Is there going to be a recurrence, or could there be a recurrence? I mean, with Anthony, that's always been the thing, is what next? What's around the corner with him? And it's always been physical. I still maintain this, and some people will disagree, but I maintain that the biggest issue with Anthony Richardson is not his performance, it's his health. Because performance can improve.
Sure.
Performance can improve, right? And I think with his God-given ability, granted, there's lots of holes in his game, but with his ability, which is, second to none, just athletically, there's something there. So we're not in disagreement on that part for the most part, right? People agree, like, there's something to work with there if he can fine-tune it. And I don't know if he can, but if he can, there's something there. That is undeniable. The question has been, for me at least, as I sit here, what you can't control is the health. And that, if it remains a question, it will always hover over the actual performance. And that's the problem. So what this latest injury did, more than anything, is it brought another question to bear, to the forefront with him, for a guy that has consistently had to face those questions. And don't forget, the team is also asking the same questions you are as a fan, which is why Daniel Jones is here. So that's just the reality of it. Hope the best for him, and it seems like he's going to be okay here, but he's just kind of battling the reality of that whole recurrence. There's always another issue with him.
Stephen Holden, ESPN, our guest on the Andy Moore Automotive Group Hotline. Greg Rakestraw in for JMV here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Let me do you the professional courtesy of talking about the piece you posted today. Everybody saw the jump that Alec Pierce made from year 2 to year 3. Allowed me to fill in some context. He's a second-round pick, which means year 4, which he's on, is a contract year. What does the future look like for Alec Pierce after this season?
That is anyone's guess. But the reason I wrote the story, and as I detailed within it, there's nothing happening right now in terms of his contract. So I think the odds, I wouldn't say it's out of the question, but as we sit here right now, I don't anticipate an extension for Alec Pierce before this season. Now, that's fine, right? That doesn't necessarily mean he won't be here. But the reality is, if he has another jump or if he makes another jump this year, it just gets more expensive. And you also have the reality of those wide receiver contracts right now, they're just exploding all over the place. I mean, I would say defensive ends and wide receivers right now, outside of quarterback, that's where you want to be, those two spots. And so the reality is that is going to be a very expensive contract. I think much more than people realize, okay? You remember a couple of years ago, everyone saw the Christian Kirk contract. I think he got $17 million a year from Jacksonville, and there were all kinds of jokes about it, right? Punchlines and so forth. But the reality is that contract's a nothing contract now, okay? And that was like 2-3 years ago. So that's where we're at. I mean, Alec Pierce is definitely in that ballpark, I think, at this point, at minimum, and probably a lot more. I would say this: if he gets to beyond this season and is not signed, if he gets to the spring and is not signed, I think it's going to be tough for the Colts to hold on to him. There are going to be teams that would line up to make him an offer, okay, because they need what he does. They need big plays. That's what everybody wants.
And frankly, you've got Pittman under contract, and you've got Downs and Adonai Mitchell on rookie deals. At some point in time, that part of the math equation starts to kick into play as well.
100%. I mean, Michael Pittman Jr. this year, I believe, in terms of average salary, will be the highest paid player on the Colts roster.
Yeah.
Now, that's not in the grand scheme that high. I think he's 23, 24 million. There are players out there certainly making a lot more money than that, and their quarterback room is not as expensive, right? So that's true. However, the quarterback situation, I don't know what that's going to be in the long term. They're going to be paying a quarterback at some point here. Okay, so that's one thing. You mentioned the other two wide receivers. They're not going to re-sign all three. You wouldn't expect that, right? That's just not likely. And frankly, I think what you do is you kick the can down the road. Josh Downs is probably, in their estimation, more critical to the offense, I guess you could argue. Although the argument for Alec Pierce is every 1 out of every 10 times he touches the ball, it's a touchdown. Okay, so that's a pretty good calling card to have. So I don't know what's the right move or the wrong move, but I would agree with you. It is a very complicated situation for the Colts, and they have other moves that they'll have to make that will be costly, including, by the way, a guy in the same position as Alec Pierce contract-wise, which is Bernard Raymond, going into his final year of his contract, and that one you've got to get done.
Yes, you have to have the left tackle. No doubt about that. All right. One of my friend's favorite football sayings was, it's not the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and the Joes. But I'm going to ask you about the X's and O's. Clearly, there are more weapons on defense than there had been in years gone by, but there's a new guy in charge of using those weapons. And as our Colts coverage picks up, we will drill down more on the details on stuff like this. But big picture, Stephen, how does this defense look different under Lou Anarumo than it did under Gus Bradley?
Well, I think it's going to be very different. I think conceptually it's going to be different. And I don't mean, we don't have to get to talk about this. We can just talk about it from this perspective. It will be different in terms of they will take the action to the opponent as opposed to kind of keeping everything in front of them, keeping it under control, and being less aggressive. They will be the aggressors. That doesn't mean they'll win. That doesn't mean that every play will be a great call. But I think from a mentality perspective, if you look at it from that perspective, it's very, very different. And I think this goes back to, honestly, I would say, the start of the Chris Ballard era. Matt Eberflus was supposed to be initially the defensive coordinator for the coach who never showed up.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Yep.
So we know who we're talking about there. Now, you notice he was kept on board, and then when Frank Reich came in, they retained him and so forth. Now, the reason for that is because Chris Ballard was very much a fan of that style of defense. The origins of it would be sort of the Tampa 2 origin. It's not the same scheme, but I'm just saying that the genesis of it comes from that. So, and who did Chris Ballard work for very early in his career? The Chicago Bears, Lovie Smith, the same tree as Tony Dungy, etc. So he was always a fan of that style of defense. Now, when Eberflus moved on, here comes Gus Bradley. Now, that was a Frank Reich hire, not Chris Ballard, but I would say he also had some philosophies that were similar to those of Matt Eberflus. So I think that Chris Ballard was very much okay with that, very, very much on board with that. And I just think conceptually it's going to change. There's going to be the most different, I think, perspective we've seen on defense since Chris Ballard's been in the building. And Shane Steichen is a real fan of this, which I think he played a big role in this hire. There's no question about it. I know he did. And he just felt like playing against Lou Anarumo has just been one of the hardest things he's had to do as a play caller. And that informed his decision to make this hire. And how specifically has he been difficult to play against? It's the changing and evolving game plans for the most part. And that's, I think, the interesting thing. There's a very Belichickian approach there. And I think that's a good thing. I think that keeps your opponents off balance and on their toes.
There are 23 days until training camp starts. How many of those days will you spend thinking about football?
As few as possible. I think so. Look, I mean, I know that people can't wait for football, but you get this, right?
Yep.
So you're one of the few people who understand this. Like once that light goes green, you're in, man.
Yep.
You're in till January. If you're lucky, it's January. If your team's really good, it could be longer, which I'd be fine with, by the way. But no, it's a lifestyle, man. And so I'm just hanging on to my last couple of weeks. I've got vacation this week, next week. And then it's off to Bristol for meetings, and the next week we are in training camp, baby. So my next month is spoken for.
My guess is the next time you and I speak, we'll be in person at Graham Park. I do look forward to it, but for the love of God, get away while you can. Thanks for the time this afternoon, my friend. I appreciate it.
I am in my heart of hearts looking forward to it. All I'm saying is I can be a little bit patient is all I'm saying.
Listen, I'm going to get out of the country before the next time I see you. I understand where you're coming from completely.
Gotcha.
Be good. I'll see you in 3 weeks.
All right, see you.
Stephen Holder of ESPN joining us again on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Again, Stephen and I will be in Baltimore together on August the 7th. But you know what reminds me of Baltimore? Franklin, Indiana. The Legends of Indiana Golf Club. That is where 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan will have the Fan Invitational Golf Outing presented by Franciscan Health. All of your favorite radio hosts will be there, which means I'm not one of your favorites because I won't be there. But Jeff Rickard, Kevin Bowen, James Boyd, Jake Query, JMV, I hope that James and his ponytail can make it there at some point in time to enjoy the day. Thursday, August 7th, 10 a.m., 1075thefan.com, 1075 The Fan on social. We'll always have more information. You know who has plenty of information? I do. Aaliyah Boston's going to be a WNBA All-Star starter. Caitlin Clark's going to be a team captain. Let's keep talking about the Fever. They're playing for $500,000 tomorrow night. Scott Agnes of Fieldhouse Files will join us, talk about it next. 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. draft picks that don't make the league. Or if you're a second-round pick, you're like, all right, I'm going to get an invite to camp. I'm probably not making a team. That will sort of take care of itself. To me, is time and space, and I think you kind of know where I'm heading with this. The league has now expanded to a 44-game schedule. Originally, teams were playing in largely NBA buildings. That's the case here. It's not the case in every market. Or you have some teams that play in different buildings now, unless Caitlin Clark shows up. Then you get the biggest barn you can to kind of fit everybody. So where I'm going with this is the league has been mid-May to, say, mid-October from a playoff standpoint, and that's been your hard cutoff because the NBA season starts. We're still years away from getting there, but does this mean more games? Does this mean starting earlier? Does this mean running later? Your educated guess on that.
Yeah, I would think you'd have to add a few more weeks, perhaps just because of the number of teams. But all that said, here's the thing to keep in mind. The 3 cities added, notably, all had existing infrastructure. They were NBA ownership. They have NBA buildings. And so you can also see, I think, the emphasis on that. And those franchises generally have been the most successful. And I think you've been able to have this level of expansion because of the success of the Golden State Valkyries, who are owned by the Warriors and all those sort of things. However, that said, I don't think you can change too much of the schedule because of already the number of inventory of events because of the NBA franchise on that side. So I think the biggest thing these franchises would like to see is more space in between games. The Fever just wrapped up, I think it was 5 games in 7 days, including a back-to-back that was a home road. Those are the things you'd really like to clean up. The good news is it's not all at one time, but I go back to that talent level. And again, I think maybe my emphasis here, Rick, is the top-end talent, the needle movers, which obviously starts with Caitlin. It goes to Asia Wilson, Sabrina Ionescu. Do you have that same level of talent coming in? To some extent, you're going to have Juju Watkins from the college ranks and others here soon. But having an expansion draft basically every year for the next 5 years will be very interesting to see how it negatively impacts things.
All right. You are talking to the most experienced broadcaster having to work in midseason tournaments you could find. I did a Jägermeister Cup match on Saturday night. I did radio for U.S. Open Cup matches last year. You were on your way to the Commissioner's Cup, or at least the Indiana Fever are on their way to the Commissioner's Cup. I got to be honest with you, I really hadn't followed said tournament until I realized the Indiana Fever were going to be in the finals. Give me the 30,000-foot explanation of this, my friend, if you don't mind.
Yeah, you're not alone there, Rake. I think it's the same thing. The only reason Pacer fans understood it is they advanced to the championship in that first season. So totally understandable. I think it's year 5 that they'll crown a champion. And the biggest emphasis in all this is what it means for the players. There's a $500,000 player pool prize on the line for the winners of that team. And so for the bottom end rosters, they just about might match their own salary. It could be $40,000, $50,000 per player right there. And so for Caitlin Clark, yeah, not a big deal.
Sure.
But say Ari McDonald, who just signed with the team, it's significant. And then I've learned from the Pacers here, I don't think win would be insignificant in that this group has not experienced big games and big winning before. They went to the playoffs last year, first time in a decade last year, but did not win a game. So from a team standpoint, I think that's where it would be beneficial.
All right, so to be blunt, we obviously knew at the beginning of last year a lot more eyeballs were going to care about the Indiana Fever. That has still been the case, even when Caitlin Clark has not been able to play. But in terms of scrutiny, breaking down results, the Pacers' playoff run took a lot of oxygen out of the room. Now that is no longer the case. So now we look up and go, all right, Caitlin's missed several games. Stephanie White missed a couple of games. DeWanna Bonner is here and now DeWanna Gunner from the Indiana Fever. And it's 8-8. How concerned should we be about this start about 40% of the way through the season?
I think my biggest concern would first be the health of Caitlin Clark.
Of course.
Without her, they are not a playoff team. So you should be concerned by that. I definitely am concerned by Bonner leaving just because she was that headlined offseason move. And so not only, why did she want out, just not a good fit and such, although she was expected to be an impactful starter on what could be a finals team. And so for her wanting out shakes things up and negatively impacts, obviously, the depth of this group. On its face value, Greg, with this in terms of the record, I'm not too worried about that. We are still so far into the season. Fans may not even recognize they still have 8 more games before All-Star break here in Indianapolis in 3 weeks, including a 5-game homestand. So a lot of ground may be made up during that stretch. But again, you start with Caitlin's health, then you go to the depth of this roster. And right now, I should also mention your backup center, Demiris Dantas, is away playing with the national team here for a couple weeks. So it's just been, the word I keep going back to, Rake, is it's been disruptive. There is nothing consistent and there's been lack of continuity with this group, and I think that has negatively impacted. If they can get some stability, I think we'll see some forward progress with this group moving forward.
All right, doctor, give me the diagnosis. We see Caitlin tomorrow night. We see Caitlin Thursday night. What is the injury, and what is the timeline at this point?
Yeah, so it's still that left side. Before it was a left quad strain that kept her out for a little bit. Then she came back. You got to believe they're connected in some way just because of the body chain, right, that we've been hearing all about and we see with these pro athletes. You overcompensate something or things happen there. But in terms of this current injury, it's a left groin strain. She's getting treatment with it daily. She was at practice yesterday wearing tights on both legs for the first time. I think that helps with compression and keeping the injury a little bit warm. That said, though, Rake, Stephanie White said she was limited, didn't do contact work, just did shooting, which all suggests to me, one, you're easing her way back smartly, but two, it's going to be a very close call if it's even that in terms of Tuesday's game. What today is about is how does she respond from that injury, and then you add in a whole nother travel aspect. I just feel like it's a low chances just because you cannot afford to rush her back so early into the season.
All right, couple quick things, and then we'll let you go. And you referenced the All-Star game, and obviously that is here. I think most were aware of that. If not, there's this bright, shiny new court at the airport that tells you, hey, the WNBA All-Star game is coming up. Knowing how many events we are so spoiled and lucky to get to host on a regular basis in Indianapolis, the WNBA All-Star game being here kind of means what exactly? What will be different that we don't see, say, in other events that come to town on a regular basis, Scott?
Yeah, I think this is just helping catapult the league and staying along the same theme of how Kelly Kroskoff, team president, the Fever, and Mel Raines all want to make Indianapolis the central hub to women's sports. The Friday event, which NBA fans would know as All-Star Saturday, three-point contest and all that, Caitlin Clark has previously said she plans to participate, wants to do it in Indy. That has not yet been announced, but if she could participate in that, it could help that night take off for the first time. And then in terms of the Saturday game, it's obviously the first time it's been here in Indianapolis. It got a record TV rating up 305% from the previous year, and that will be very similar to, I think, what fans have seen before. It's just the best of women's basketball, all right here in Indianapolis for a couple of days.
Caitlin gets to be the team captain. What exactly does that mean?
It means coming up in a week, she will select her team, and Nafisa Collier will on Minnesota Lynx, who we'll also see on Tuesday. She'll pick the other, so she will have a say in what her team looks like. We do not yet know what the head coaches are either at this point. Remember, last year was pretty cool having Cheryl Miller as her assistant coach for that All-Star team.
I was going to say, Angel Reese is going to be an All-Star, right?
Yeah, presumably, for sure.
Does Caitlin, do they have to be on different teams? Let's not lie about this. Does Caitlin pick Angel Reese, or do they go on other teams because you have to set up the television that way?
I think she would go on separate teams just because they're not friends. And also along the same lines is she's going to draft Aaliyah Boston. She wants her teammate. But more than that, look, they're just not friends, and that's fine. I don't view it as a rivalry again whatsoever. But you're going to draft the players you like to play with, and it might be Kate Martin won't be an All-Star, I guess, but it'll be players she's developed relationships with. And keep in mind, Caitlin doesn't just go out there; she wants to win. So I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of team she puts around herself.
Final thing before we let you go. Again, Caitlin has missed 7 of the 16 games, and some of you may know this, some of you may not. Again, she didn't miss a game last year. She didn't miss a game in college. So this is something new, something different, something that's a bit concerning in one hand, but frankly, it's just the nature of professional sports in the other. But automatically in your mind, you go, all right, what does that mean for crowds? Crowds really haven't changed. Just kind of your thoughts on the crowd level we have seen, even on nights where number 22 is not in uniform.
Yeah, first of all, you're absolutely right. This is an entirely new experience for Caitlin that she's having to figure out on the fly. I think in going into tomorrow's game, the thing that's also noteworthy is what she said when she came back and said, look, I don't want a minutes restriction. If I can't play my full minutes, if I can't get myself out there, I just don't want to play. And in all my years covering sports, I've never heard an athlete necessarily say that. And so I think keep that in mind for Tuesday. Now, in terms of the crowds and such, I think the biggest hit rake has been the reseller market. Instead of tickets going for $250 the day before they play in Dallas for Caitlin and Paige Becker's meeting for the first time, you have the last 3 number 1 picks with Aaliyah Boston as well. Those tickets plummeted. Same with Chicago when the Fever went to play at the United Center and all those. The tickets are already sold. So there's no issue from that standpoint. You're seeing a little bit reduction in attendance, but overall, especially here in Indianapolis, Greg, the crowds have been fantastic and almost the same. I mean, and to Caitlin's credit as well, she's attending every one of these games, walking around, spending 20 minutes signing autographs, which obviously is not required or anything like that, but she talked a lot about, even last year, about how much she knows families are sacrificing, how much money they're spending, and how, this might be the one game a kid is ever able to go to. So she wants to make it memorable in some form or fashion.
We have just spent 14 minutes on the Indiana Fever, and now I'm about to get to the team that 8 days ago was in the NBA Finals. Let's start kind of smaller news first. Tony Bradley re-ups. Is he the Pacers' backup center next year? Is he their third center?
Yeah, I don't think it's a guarantee he's even with them whatsoever. That's the other thing to keep in mind here is you have the option there, and that keeps him under contract, but it's a non-guaranteed deal. So they could waive him today, they could waive him tomorrow, and not $1 is lost there. So it's a little bit different situation than maybe others in that respect. I would not rule him out. I would not see him as the backup center. I'm working currently under the assumption here you bring back Miles Turner, you bring back Isaiah Jackson, and it was great to see Isaiah Jackson about 7 months removed from surgery in that final week of the NBA Finals, Rake. He was out there with his teammates, and obviously teams are only going to show us shooting. So he was out there, but he was like every other player out there, knocking down jumpers, knocking down three-pointers, getting shots up. So I'm under the working thought of that's what they'll do. They picked up made him a qualifying offer, which means he's a restricted free agent, which means if any team offers him a deal, the Pacers reserve the right to match. The reality is he's coming off an Achilles injury. Same thing with James Wiseman. I just don't think you can afford to bring back 2 centers who have an Achilles, and I would lean on Isaiah Jackson, a player you drafted, you believe in, and was showing incredible signs until his leg gave out about 10 days into the season.
All right, so Miles Turner, it is certainly assumed he wants to be back here. The team has obviously made it clear they want to have him back here. The number that I saw, and I believe it was Marks with ESPN.com, had 3 years and $25 million a season. Is that a good deal for both sides?
I would say that is a fantastic deal for the Pacers. If I'm on Miles' side, it's a little under, a little below of what I'm wanting. I'm looking at Isaiah Hartenstein, who's making about $28-29 million per year. I think if I'm Miles, I'm asking for a little more than 30 and trying to keep it at that round number of 30 at the least. But I think that's also a good compromise from both sides as well, because here's the other reality. There's no one bidding against him right now. Right. Nobody has that flexibility this offseason. So it's a bad summer to be a free agent. The only team with some semblance of cap space is the Brooklyn Nets. So most teams are positioning themselves to be free agents and to have a lot of money to spend next offseason. But Miles doesn't want this partnership to end, neither do the Pacers. So I think that would be a reasonable number, the $25 to $28 million per range per season. Probably do a 3-year deal, maybe looking at a player option to give him a little bit more flexibility because of the reduced number. Either way, unless they trade off an asset here in a player, Greg, is they're going to be into the luxury tax for the first time in 20 years. But I will also emphasize here is it doesn't matter until literally this date next year. So not when they start the season, not the trade deadline or anything like that. So I think you go all in, you see what this team looks like next year, and then depending on how it goes, if you're having a bad year, below 500 or certainly not a finals run, then you might trade a player or two to fall below it. But also that's an issue for the owner. Nothing for any fans should have to worry about.
Any doubt in your mind, that Miles Turner is an Indiana Pacer next year?
There is not, just because of those items we laid out there and the fact that Pacers need centers. Miles needs to get paid, and also it's worked out very well here for both sides in Indy. So I would be stunned.
I think this franchise also likes to reward loyalty. And when we talk about Miles in terms of games played alongside guys like Dale Davis, Jeff Foster, that means something in Indianapolis. And again, that to me is one of the ultimate reasons why he is coming back. Fieldhouse Files, you should know it by now. If not, what the hell is wrong with you? Scott Agnes joining us again on from the Drive Hubler Studios and doing so on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Thanks for the time, my friend.
You got it. Headed to Minneapolis for full coverage of the Commissioner's Cup coming up tomorrow.
Again, thank you, Scott Agnes, for being a part of the show. We're up against it time-wise. Let's get to a break. We'll come back. We'll try to make sense of all of this when we come back. But the best news is John is back tomorrow after his one contractually obligated day off for the entire year. 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Thanks for putting up with me, Greg Rakestraw, not JMV. John is back tomorrow. Everybody in the building gets Friday off, which is a good thing. July 4th is kind of the one holiday around here. That and Labor Day, we kind of know, hey, I'm actually going to get some downtime here because it's not exactly atypical to work on Memorial Day, especially when the day before had both an Indiana Pacers playoff game and the Indianapolis 500. So everybody here gets a 3-day weekend. Like all of my friends that work in high school athletics, this is moratorium week. So, like, my Facebook feed is just filled with people traveling over the course of the last week. I got to do my traveling last week, and then the missus and I get out of town a couple of weeks from now. Just the two of us, which we've not done that for an extended length of time in, about 6 years, and it's probably about 5.5 years overdue at this point, so very much looking forward to that. You will have a chance to hear me again later this week. I know, stunning surprise. You hear a lot of me on this radio station without having a daily show. I get that. Soccer Saturday, of course, on Saturday morning. We've got the Friday and Saturday night I would say best of, year in review and year preview editions. Now you may be thinking, hey, wait a minute, it's the middle of the year. Exactly. Friday night is 6 months of recapping. So honestly, very Pacers heavy from the first 6 months of the year. And then it is previewing what we think is going to happen from now going forward. Some of those that will join me on the show: Kurt Cavan of, Trackside with Cavan and Kevin, Mike Chappell of CBS 4 and Fox 59, the gentleman you just heard in Scott Agnes, Jeff Rabjohns of Peegs.com, Kyle Neddenrip of the Indianapolis Star, Alan Karpick of goldandblack.com. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody in there, but if not, we'll add them into the mix at some point in time. So I'll be on this radio station, plus on radio stations across the state, Friday night and Saturday night from 10 until midnight. You want a recap of the first 6 months? Consider this your check-in at the fiscal year portion of the year, and then a preview coming up on Saturday night. We'll have all those for you coming up right here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Got this from Corey. Hello, Corey. Corey, responding to my question to Stephen Holder about, all right, what is an NBA locker room or what is an NBA beat like versus an NFL beat? And Stephen goes, it's much more relaxed than an NBA locker room. Corey had some pretty good insight into this. He goes, locker rooms always felt like the gap between next man up in the NBA is much larger than the NFL and larger to roster size. 80% of an NBA roster feel job secure, whereas 80% of the NFL roster feel like they're playing for their spot every day. And Corey has spent time in both locker rooms. He would know that well. My buddy Darnell says, hey, can I have some love for the Indy Thunder? Absolutely. And it may seem weird to say Indy Thunder after the Indiana Pacers just played the Oklahoma City Thunder. I didn't even think about that until I'm playing a buddy of mine in tennis a couple of weeks ago, like right before the NBA Finals. He goes, that's an odd-looking hat. I'm like, oh, yeah, it says Indian Thunder on it. I didn't even think about that. But the Indy Thunder predate the Oklahoma City Thunder. My buddy Darnell Booker's beat baseball team that is 18-0 going to the World Series. Darnell, there's your shout-out. Appreciate you tuning in on the program today. Here was the guest list in case you want to go back and listen to any part of the show, the interviews, etc. All available now, 1075thefan.com. Chris Canal, the owner of the Lebanon Leprechauns. There you go. And the reason we had him on is because TBT is coming up in 3 weeks at Inkle Fieldhouse. I guess 2.5 weeks at this point in time. And they have a team, the Go Time Green Machine. There's alumni team from Butler, IU, Valpo, Ohio State. There's a team called the Fort Wayne Champs, but this team comprised of largely guys that play in the TBL. TBL is the basketball league, which has teams in Lebanon, Kokomo, Logansport, amongst other locations. So give them a follow when you have the opportunity. Rick Bozich, tomorrow, his final column will run at WDRB.com. That is the Fox affiliate in Louisville. Rick, of course, for years wrote for the Louisville Courier-Journal. Rick has been writing for 50 years, and Rick was kind enough on one of his final days on the job to join us on the program. So thank you very much to Rick. Mike Fulta joined us in the program as well. Could there be NHL hockey coming to Indianapolis? I doubt it. I hope I'm wrong. I'd love to see it, but I think that was just kind of a market that was linked to a story. I'm not sure there's much traction behind it. Again, the Indy Fuel are doing exceedingly well at the ECHL level because they just moved to a building that is built for 7,000 to 8,000 a game. Are we an NHL market? Probably not. But Mike is from this area and is doing NHL hockey because he's the voice of the Utah Mammoth. And in this hour, it was Stephen Holder and Scott Agnes that joined the program. Again, all those available now, 1075thefan.com, that has more information. I'll be like hanging around here on Wednesday. Maybe I'll pop onto a microphone at some point in time. Maybe not. I'll get plenty of airtime over the course of the weekend. James, good to hang with you as always. Hair is looking marvelous, by the way. Don't let anybody in the building give me any crap about it, okay?
Much appreciated.
And again, going as like a pocket-sized Yokozuna could be in the cards for you.
That's my Halloween costume right there, man.
For little pocket Yokozuna. My name is Greg Rakestraw. Enjoy the rest of your Monday evening. Thanks for putting up with me. 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.